get started. Thank you.
All right, then we are ready to proceed. We'll call the case of Stevie Rogers versus Drew Mars. I'm your presiding judge. My name is Brandy Snow. Scoring judges, if you'll please look quickly to the bottom left of your screen, make sure your video and your audio are off, and keep them off until or unless the bailiff tells you otherwise. You should also have your video set to hide all non-video participants, so you should only right now be able to see me and the two advocates who will be handling pretrial. Will the attorneys please make appearances?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, or I'm sorry, good afternoon. My name is Alana Goldberg, and today I am joined by my co-counsel, Mr. Leo Mandani.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
And today we'll be representing the plaintiff, Mr. Stephen Rogers.
Good afternoon.
Appearances from the defense, Your Honor. Good afternoon. My name is Brennan Bartley. I'm joined today by my co-counsel, Mr. Brandon Benjamin.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
Today, we'll be representing the defendant in this case, Ms. Drew Mars.
Good afternoon.
All right, anything that we need to cover in pretrial?
Yes, Your Honor. First, just because we're on Zoom, if there's ever a point where you can't hear or see somebody, if you'd please interrupt us and let us know.
Of course.
Also, there's already been a pretrial ruling that what's been pre-marked as exhibits 1 through 7 is pre-admitted so that we can use it at any point during trial, including the opening statements.
Okay, is that the defense's understanding as well?
Yes, it is, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead.
And finally, the plaintiff would like to invoke rules 603 and 615 of the Midlands Rules of Evidence. These rules, 603 is the constructive swearing in of all witnesses, and 615 is the constructive sequestration of all witnesses, barring party representatives, which on our part today would be Mr. Stephen Rogers, the plaintiff.
Okay, any objection from the defense on that?
No objection, Your Honor. We just note that our party, Ms. Drew Mars, will be present throughout today's trial.
Understood. Anything else?
The plaintiff is ready to proceed.
Defense?
Yes, Your Honor, just one thing. We'd like to ask that all objection arguments requiring offers of proof be heard constructively in a sidebar outside the earshot of the members of the jury.
Constructively, yes.
And with that, we're ready to proceed to openings.
Okay, we are now going to hear opening statements from each party. Everyone, please make sure you're in speaker view. That button's on the upper right part of the screen. And attorneys, please remember to mute your audio when the other attorney is speaking. And I will mute mine as well.
Your Honor, you are muted. May I proceed?
Yes, you may proceed.
Thank you. May it please the court. The pills, the prints, the payoff. On the morning of August 15th, 2018, Stephen Rogers woke up to the news that his beloved grandmother had passed away. One moment, Your Honor. Stephen Rogers' grandmother was a woman named Agatha Lee. She was 82 years old. She was a brilliant novelist. And today you'll learn that she was killed by the defendant, her caretaker, Drew Mars. The defendant was somebody that Miss Lee trusted. She had worked for Miss Lee for 10 years, lived in Miss Lee's home, become like family to Miss Lee. And today you'll learn that the defendant abused that trust. You'll hear that the day before Miss Lee died, the defendant snuck into Miss Lee's room, opened Miss Lee's pill organizer, and swapped out Miss Lee's nightly arthritis medication for an identical set of pills that she knew Miss Lee was deathly allergic to. The defendant then put those arthritis medication pills back in their original bottle, leaving her fingerprints on the pills she had replaced, and leaving Miss Lee clueless to the fact that the pills she took that night would kill her. And you'll learn why the defendant swapped out those pills. Because when Miss Lee died, the defendant got her payoff. Miss Lee's entire estate, valued at $20 million. The pills, the prints, the payoff. And that payoff, that's why my client is suing the defendant. Because here in Midlands, we have something called the Slayer statute. And that statute says that if the defendant killed Miss Lee, if the defendant knowingly caused Miss Lee's death, then the defendant is not entitled to any of Miss Lee's money. And in order for that statute to take effect, we have to prove, by something called a preponderance of the evidence, which just means more likely than not, that the defendant killed Miss Lee. And to do that today, we're going to show you the pills, the prints, and the payoff. First, the pills. You'll learn today that after Miss Lee died, the detectives in this case found a pill called chloroandramine in her system. You'll learn that that pill was an over-the-counter medication that Miss Lee had a deathly allergy to. And you'll learn that that medication was actually identical in looks to Miss Lee's arthritis medication. So we'll prove that in order to kill Miss Lee, all someone would have to do would be to access her pill organizer and to swap out that nightly arthritis medication for its deadly alternative. But how do we know that person was the defendant? Well, that's the prints. Because you'll also learn today that detectives found the defendant's fingerprints in two important places. First, on arthritis pills that you'll hear the defendant had touched and then put back in their original bottle. And second, on a bag in the defendant's closet that had chloroandramine pills, that deadly substance, inside of it. And that'll bring us to the final factor in today's case, the payoff. Because today you'll learn that the defendant actually overheard a conversation where Miss Lee was planning to change her will and leave everything she had to her grandson, the plaintiff, not the defendant. You'll learn that not only did the defendant overhear that conversation, the defendant actually overheard Miss Lee talking with her lawyer and planning to meet with her lawyer later that week. So today we'll prove that in order to receive $20 million, it wasn't enough for the defendant to wait for Miss Lee to die. The defendant had to kill Miss Lee as soon as possible. The prints, the pills, and the payoff. Members of the jury, today we can't bring back Agatha Lee. We can't bring back a literary genius. We can't bring back a trusting and generous woman. We can't bring back Mr. Rogers' grandmother. But what we can do is make sure that the person who killed Miss Lee does not get to profit off of her death. And to do that, all we ask of you, members of the jury, is that you follow the facts and that you listen for the pills, the prints, and the payoff. And at the end of today's trial, my colleague, Mr. Mandani, he'll stand before you, he'll review that evidence, and he'll ask that you find in favor of the plaintiff. Thank you.
Thank you. Opening statement from the defense,
Yes, Your Honor, just one moment.
of course.
Sorry, I thought my video was on. Can everyone see and hear me all right?
Yes, you are clear. Proceed whenever you're ready.
Members of the jury, it's true that Agatha Lee was murdered. It's true that the murderer, they're in this courtroom today. But that person isn't my client, Drew Mars. That murderer is someone who was running out of money, who was running out of time. It's June 2018, and the plaintiff has just spent nearly the past decade traveling the world, living it up, living on a trust fund left to him by his parents. But in June 2018, that trust fund has just run out. And all the plaintiff's got left is his watch and his car. Those aren't going to last him very long either. To make matters worse, the plaintiff's grandmother, Agatha Lee, a multimillionaire, she's just written to him that he is out of her will, that he's been replaced by some caretaker. The plaintiff is running out of money. He's running out of time. So the plaintiff comes up with a plan. He's going to find Agatha Lee. He's going to pay $10,000 to do it. And then he's going to get back into her good graces. He's going to make sure that no matter what, she puts him back in that will so that he can get the more than $20 million he thinks he's entitled to. But we're going to hear there's just one problem with that. Because even though we're going to hear that Miss Lee and her grandson, the plaintiff, even though they started getting along, it wasn't enough for this plaintiff. Because like we're going to hear from every other witness who actually spoke to Agatha Lee on the day of her death, they're all going to tell us the same thing. Agatha Lee wouldn't give the plaintiff what he wanted. Agatha Lee wouldn't put the plaintiff back in the will. The plaintiff was still running out of money. He was still running out of time. But he had one last trick up his sleeve. The Slayer statute. All right, that's a simple term for a law where it means if you kill someone, you can't get any money from their estate. It all goes to their next of kin. So the plaintiff knows that if they can get Drew Mars blamed for Agatha Lee's death, well, then they're going to get all that money, all that over $20 million, all to himself. That's the real reason we're here today, members of the jury. The evidence is going to show that that is why this lawsuit was filed against my client. But in order for this claim to work, the plaintiff needs to make sure that Agatha Lee dies. So that's exactly what he does. We're going to hear about how immediately after the plaintiff is denied that inheritance, he's left alone in that house for hours. Hours in which he had plenty of time to creep into Agatha Lee's room, switch the pills the way that Miss Goldberg was just telling you about, and then sneak back out the door to Drew Mars's room to plant the pills there to make sure she gets blamed. And then walk back out and just wait. Wait for the Slayer statute to do its work, to make sure he gets that inheritance, to make sure that he doesn't have to worry about running out of money for a long, long time. You might be thinking, members of the jury, that what I've just told you sounds awfully similar to what Miss Goldberg and the plaintiff has just told you. There's one key difference, though, that you're going to have to keep in mind throughout today's trial, and that's this. We as the defense, we don't have any burden in this case. We don't have to prove a thing. The plaintiff and only the plaintiff has the burden of proof today. They have to prove to you not just that their theory of the case is more likely than ours, but that it's more likely than all other theories combined. That it's more likely than not true. That burden is one that they'll fail to meet. And it's one that they'll fail to meet because the evidence just doesn't support it. I want you to remember something that Miss Goldberg said just a few minutes ago. She said that you're going to hear about Miss Mars sneaking into Agatha Lee's bedroom, that you're going to hear about how she switched those pills. Members of the jury, no witness, none, not from us, not from the plaintiff, will ever take that stand and tell you that they actually saw that happen, because it never happened. Because the person who was running out of money, who was running out of time, it wasn't my client. It wasn't Drew Mars. Drew Mars was not the person who killed Agatha Lee. And that's why at the end of this trial, my co-counsel, Mr. Brandon Benjamin, he's going to come before you. He's going to ask you to tell the plaintiff that he's out of time. He's going to ask that you find Drew Mars not liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bartley, Ms. Goldberg. Before the plaintiff calls the first witness, I'll ask everyone to switch to gallery view. That's the button in the top right. And that will allow you to see the attorneys and the witness at the same time. Give everybody just a second to do that. And then plaintiff, if you will call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Mr. Stephen Rogers to the stand.
Okay, Mr. Rogers, you are assumed sworn. And Ms. Goldberg, you may proceed when you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Sure. Hi, I'm Stephen Rogers.
Sir, how old are you?
I just turned 33 in July.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a writer. I work mostly in nonfiction and historical fiction.
All right, I want to talk about why you're here today. Mr. Mandani, can we get Exhibit 1, which has been pre-admitted on the screen? Do you recognize the person in this photograph?
I do. That's my grandmother, Agatha Lee.
What was your grandmother like?
Well, for the last 10 years, Nana was the only family I had. She was warm, generous. She loved to have fun, but she was also eccentric. She wrote one best-selling novel and then pretty much disappeared off the face of the earth. She liked to keep to herself, but she always made time for me.
Why was Agatha Lee your only family?
My parents died in a car accident in 2008, a drunk driver. I was home with Nana when we got the news.
And when was the last time you saw your grandmother?
Well, I was staying with her from July 4th of 2018 up until the time she passed away.
Sir, I want to talk about somebody else involved in today's case. Do you know Drew Mars?
I do. She was Nana's caretaker and live-in nurse.
Do you know what the defendant did for your grandmother?
She would cook meals sometimes, clean up after Nana, and she would prepare her pills every week.
What, if anything, do you know about the relationship between the defendant and your grandmother?
Nana treated her like family. When Drew was making dinner, she would help. If Drew was reading, she would bring her a cup of tea. I mean, they were close.
Sir, do you have Exhibit 9 in front of you?
I do, yeah.
And Your Honor, we'd ask to be able to put up Exhibit 9 as a blow-up. It will be hidden from the jury until it's admitted.
Any objection to that with that stipulation?
No objections, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Now, Mr. Rogers, what is Exhibit 9?
It's a copy of my grandmother's will from 2018.
Does it look like a fair and accurate copy of that will?
It does.
The plaintiff moves Exhibit 9 into evidence.
Any objection?
Without objection.
It's accepted.
Sir, could you read the first sentence of Article 2, please?
Sure. I leave my entire estate, including all real and personal property, including future royalties from my book, Death in a Bottle, to my devoted and beloved caretaker, Drew Mars.
How did it make you feel to learn that your grandmother was giving everything she owned to the defendant?
It was a wake-up call for me. I mean, I had gotten distant from her after my parents died. I guess I had been trying to get as far away as I could from what happened. I tried to fill my days with travel, new projects, but with the 10th anniversary of my parents' death coming up, I had to see my grandma.
And how would you describe your relationship with your grandmother when you did go to see her?
I felt like I was a kid again. Nana and I would spend entire days watching movies, playing games. I even took her to the zoo once. We started to grow apart. after the accident, but being back together, it felt like we were best friends again.
And that summer, did you have any kind of relationship with the defendant?
While I was staying with Nana, we lived in the same house, but that was about it. I tried to talk to her, have a conversation, but it was always tense.
What do you mean it was tense?
Well, she was always asking me when I was leaving how long I was planning on staying, and she would never let me and Nana have a minute alone. I mean, we'd try to have a private conversation, and she'd find some way to butt in.
Did the defendant ever tell you anything about your grandmother's health?
Yeah, it was kind of strange. We were just sitting there kind of talking, and all of a sudden she goes, Agatha has a fatal allergy to chloroandramine, right? If she took even one pill, she'd be dead. I didn't know why she said that.
While you were with her, was your grandmother on any medication that you know of?
Yeah, I saw Drew put pills into a pill organizer for her every week. She'd take them before she went to bed. She kept it on her bedside table.
And sir, do you know anything about what those pills were, what they did?
No, nothing.
In the weeks before your grandmother's death, did you notice that anything seemed to be wrong with her health?
No, she seemed fine.
So when was the first time that you realized something was wrong?
It was August 15th. Drew woke me up pounding on my door. She said that she couldn't get Nana awake.
What did you do at that point?
I mean, I went with her into her room, and that's when I saw her. Nana had always been this, larger than life figure, but seeing her on the bed, she looked so small, so frail.
Were you ever able to wake her up?
No.
I'd like to talk about why that might have been the case. You told us earlier that the defendant was set to inherit all of your grandmother's money. Was there ever any indication that that might change?
Yeah. The day before she died, Nana called me into her study. She said that she was so glad to have me home and that she changed her mind about the will.
What exactly did she tell you?
Well, she said that she was planning to reinstate me as her heir and that Drew wouldn't get anything.
What happened after that conversation with your grandmother?
Well, I mean, the second we walked out of the study, there was Drew. She was standing right outside the door. I mean, I almost ran into her when I walked out.
Did the defendant say anything when that happened?
Sort of, yeah. She mouthed some words at me. It looked like she said, "No way."
Sir, at any point after the conversation, did you see the defendant go to your grandmother's bedroom?
I think so. Later that night, after Nana went to bed, I saw Drew tiptoeing from her room to Nana's.
Did you notice anything about the defendant's appearance at that point?
Yeah. It looked like she was holding something in her hand.
After you saw the defendant tiptoeing towards your grandmother's room, potentially holding something, did you ever see your grandmother again?
No, not alive.
You said that your grandmother had planned to change her will. Do you know if she had changed her will before she died?
No. She said she was going to, and then the next morning she was dead.
So, sir, when your grandmother died, who was set to inherit all of her money?
Drew Mars.
Thank you. Nothing further at this time.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Rogers.
Good afternoon.
My name is Brandon Benjamin. I'm just going to be asking you a few questions on behalf of the defense, okay?
Yeah.
Now, I want to start by talking about why you were really at Lee Manor in 2018, okay?
Sure. Like I said, it was the 10th anniversary of my parents' death.
Well, sir, we'll walk through that in a bit, but you showed up in July, right?
That's right. July 4th.
And sir, when you showed up in July of 2018, it had been a few years since you'd seen your grandmother.
Yeah. After my parents died, it was hard for me to see her. I mean, she looked just like my mom. But yeah, that's right.
So that was a yes to my question?
Yeah.
It had been about 7 years since you'd seen her.
In person, that's right.
So, sir, when you showed up, you were pretty desperate, right?
I mean, I wanted to see her, if that's what you mean. Yeah.
Well, you weren't just desperate because you wanted to see her. You were desperate because you were down to just $2,000 in your bank account. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's true. I had some assets and was working on publishing a book, but you're right. That's all I had in my savings.
Just $2,000 in your savings, right?
That's right.
And sir, your parents left you a trust fund when they died.
That's true. After they passed, they wanted me to be able to take care of myself.
For $2 million. That's how much that trust fund was for.
When they passed, that's how much was in it. Yeah.
In July of 2018, that trust fund had run out.
It was close to, yeah. I used it for everything.
Sir, that's a yes. It had run out in July of 2018.
That's right. Yes.
And just a few months earlier, you found out your grandmother was actually taking you out of her will.
That's true. I was abroad at the time doing research for a book, but as soon as I got back to the States, I tracked her down.
So, sir, that's a yes?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, that's right.
So just so the jury's getting this straight, it was after your grandmother took you out of her will that you showed back up at her house, right?
Once I got back to the country, I located her and I went to see her for the 10th anniversary. That's right. Yes.
Sir, that's a yes to my question?
Yes.
Sir, it was after your trust fund had ran out that you showed up to Miss Agatha Lee's doorstep, right?
It wasn't completely out, but yes, you're right.
Sir, it was after your bank account was down to just $2,000 that you saw your grandmother in person for the first time in 7 years. Did I get that right?
That's right. Like I said, it had been hard for me to see her, but I didn't want her to be alone on the 10th anniversary. And frankly, I didn't want to be alone either.
Sir, just directing it back to my question, it was after your bank account was down to $2,000 that you showed up, right?
Like I said, yeah.
Sir, I want to talk a bit more about what you and your grandmother discussed when you moved back in. Now, as you told us on direct examination, you said you two watched movies together.
Yeah, we did.
You said it felt like you were becoming best friends again.
Yeah.
But sir, you actually asked your grandmother a question a few months later.
I don't know what you mean.
Well, sir, on August 14th, the day before she died, you and your grandmother had a conversation, right?
Yeah. Like I said, she brought me into her study and she told me she had changed her mind.
Well, that's right. You two were in her study.
Yeah.
But what Agatha Lee actually said was, I'm not putting you back into my will.
No, sir, that's not what she said. She told me that she wanted to put me back in the will.
Sir, she told you she was still actually planning on leaving everything to Drew Mars.
I'm sorry, that's just not true, no.
Well, you're saying no, and you spoke about that conversation a bit on direct, but let's make something clear. To your knowledge, it was just you and Agatha in that room when the conversation happened, right?
In the room, yes, but as I said, Drew was standing like right outside the door.
So that's a yes to my question, just you two in the room.
Inside the room, yeah, that's right.
So that conversation, it wasn't recorded.
Not to my knowledge. I don't know.
You don't know about any written transcripts from that meeting?
I know. Like you said, sir, it was just me and Nana. We were having breakfast.
So the only proof that you've brought today that Agatha Lee was actually planning on changing her will, well, that's your word, right?
Objection argumentative.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor, this question's not argumentative. The witness is available to disagree. I'm asking this witness if that's the only evidence that he brought to support that claim.
Yeah, I'll allow it. It's cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, sir, the only evidence that you brought today that your grandmother was planning on changing her will and putting you back in, that's your word, right?
I guess, I mean, yeah, you're right. I didn't record the conversation. I'm just here to tell you what happened.
Well, I want to talk about what happened because the next morning, Drew Mars came into your bedroom.
Yeah, she knocked on my door.
She told you your grandmother had passed.
Uh, she told me that she couldn't wake her up. So I went with her to try. And yeah, she had passed.
A few minutes later, the cops showed up.
That's right.
When the cops got there, you insisted they run a toxicology report.
Yeah, a toxicology report, an autopsy, anything they could do to find out what happened to her.
Sir, you insisted for that report because you thought your grandmother had been poisoned.
I mean, the day before she had told me she was putting me back in the will, and then the next day she was dead. I was suspicious. Yeah.
Sir, directing it back to my question, yes or no, you asked for that tox report because you thought she had been poisoned.
That's right. Yeah, I asked for the tox report, the autopsy, everything.
But at the time, no police had said anything about poison, right?
No, not yet. That's true.
Nobody else in the room had said anything about poison.
Not that I know of.
In fact, you brought this case against Miss Mars before you knew the results of that tox report.
That's true. Like I said, I thought it was suspicious. I thought she had killed my grandma.
So is that a yes?
It is, yeah.
So the reason you brought this case before you knew those results is because, in your own words, you already knew what that report was going to say. Yes or no?
That's right. Like I said, I knew what Drew had done. You're right. Yes.
Your Honor, objection to non-responsive. Permission to strike everything after the word yes.
Any response, Ms. Goldberg?
Yes, Your Honor. My witness just confirmed what opposing counsel asked of him.
I'm going to allow you to explore that on redirect. I will strike the portion referencing Ms. Mars.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Rogers, I want to talk about something you mentioned on direct examination. You said at 9:30, around 9:30, the night of Agatha Lee's death, you saw Miss Mars walking on the second floor.
That's right. It looked like she was walking from her bedroom to Nana's.
We'll get to that in a second. You saw her walking, but to be clear, you never saw her walk inside the bedroom, right?
No, like I said, I only saw her walking from her room toward Nana's. I didn't see her actually go inside.
You never heard a door open.
Not that I remember.
You didn't hear the sound of pills clattering in a bottle, right?
No, I didn't. I was downstairs.
The afternoon before that, after your conversation with your grandmother in the study, you were actually home alone, right?
When Nana went out to lunch, that's true.
You had access to the whole house.
I guess, yeah, I was in the house.
You could have gone up to the second floor.
Yeah, I could have. That's what my bedroom was.
You could have gone to your grandmother's bedroom, right?
Maybe it had a lock on it. I don't know if she had locked it that day. I didn't go in there.
But if her door were unlocked, you could have walked inside.
If it was, yeah, I guess. Like I said, I don't know.
And if Drew Mars's room was unlocked, well, you could have walked inside there too, right?
If it was unlocked, yeah. I don't know. I don't really go in there.
So you know what pills your grandmother takes, right?
I know she took pills.
You know she takes them every night before she goes to bed.
That's right. I don't know what pills exactly, but yeah, I know she took them at night.
You know they're kept on her bedside table.
Yeah, like I said, she had a pill organizer.
You know she's deathly allergic to chlorandramine.
I do now. Yeah, Drew told me that.
You know that she died from an allergic reaction to chlorandramine.
That's correct. Yeah.
And you also know about something called the Slayer statute, right?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
What that Slayer statute says is, to your understanding, is that if Miss Mars is found liable today, she's not getting a dime of Agatha Lee's will.
Yeah, they said it basically means if you kill someone, you can't get their money.
That's right. It would go to their next of kin.
Yeah, that's what I understand.
So if Miss Mars is found liable, the estate, it goes to you.
That's right. That's what I understand.
If Miss Mars is found liable today, the book royalties from her book, those go to you as well.
Yeah, I think it's the whole estate, what Nana wanted.
If Miss Mars is found liable today, a sum of over $20 million, that goes to you, right?
As far as I understand, sir. Yes, that's right.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Your Honor, we have nothing further.
Any redirect for the witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Rogers, opposing counsel mentioned a conversation that you had in the study with your grandmother. I want to be clear. At that point, what did your grandmother say was her intention regarding her will?
She said that she wanted to put me back in the will. She said that she was happy to have me home, that she was so glad we were growing close again, and she wanted to put me back in.
And opposing counsel also mentioned that you ordered a toxicology screening. Why did you order that screening?
Like I said, I ordered a toxicology screening. I asked for an autopsy. I wanted them to do everything they could to find out what happened.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything further from this witness?
No recross, Your Honor.
The witness is excused, and you may call your next.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Mr. Bond to the virtual stand.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mondani. Mr. Bond, you are presumed sworn. Mr. Mondani, you may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Afternoon. My name is Marcus Bond.
Where are you calling in from, Mr. Bond?
Well, I'm in the Midwest right now at home. I'm working out of my basement until the pandemic's over.
What do you do for a living?
I'm what's called a consultant. Essentially, I offer private investigative services where people can call me and have me run an investigation that runs parallel to the one the police are running.
How exactly did you get involved in that line of work?
Well, I could give you some big diatribe about how it's my life's passion. And don't get me wrong, I love what I do. But the honest answer is that when your last name is Bond, you really only have two options. Either do something investigative or have every single person you ever meet make a joke about how you should be a detective. I didn't want that, so I chose the former instead, and I started my own consulting firm.
Sir, how many independent investigations have you conducted over the course of your career?
In total, probably hundreds.
How'd you get involved in today's case?
I was hired by Stephen Rogers to look into the circumstances around the death of his grandmother, a woman named Agatha Lee. I also recommended that the police arrest Drew Mars, her caretaker, for her murder.
What was your role exactly in that investigation?
Well, obviously, I left a lot of the evidence handling to the police. I collected some of the evidence myself, and I was there for most of the police's investigation. I also reviewed the police report, which detailed their entire investigation, as well as their forensic findings.
Sir, what, if any, evidence did you rely on for your recommendation to the police?
Three main things. We found evidence of a financial connection between the defendant and Miss Lee, pills that we later discovered were what had caused Miss Lee's death, as well as fingerprints from the defendant on the bag where those pills had been stored.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation. May I be heard?
Please.
Your Honor, at this point, there is a lack of foundation for this witness to testify that there was, in fact, a financial connection, that there was, in fact, pills found in a certain place. At this point, that foundation is not on the record. They're putting the cart before the horse here.
May I respond?
Yes.
Mr. Bond testified that he was with the police throughout their entire investigation, that he was by them when they were collecting evidence, that he saw all the conclusions made by the police, and he even read the police report, which, as it's been stipulated, is already admissible that Mr. Bond can testify to. And that foundation has been sufficiently laid, and we will be delving deeper into how he reached those conclusions one by one, Your Honor.
Okay. Anything further, Mr. Bartley?
Yes, Your Honor. He's already testified that he accompanied the police. That's fine, but that's not sufficient foundation for him to say there's a financial connection. They need to talk about what they found before they can make any sort of conclusions regarding that. They need to establish that foundation first.
May I respond?
Mr. Mondani? Yes.
Your Honor, both in opening statements and during the testimony of Stevie Rogers, we've already established that there is an issue at in stake today about the will. That is the financial connection we're discussing. That foundation has been laid. And Your Honor, we are about to delve deeper into what that financial connection is and how that affects today's case.
Yeah, I'm going to overrule the objection. My reading of the rules of evidence would suggest that as long as that foundation is laid as we go along, that the conclusions are admissible. If that foundation is not laid, Mr. Bartley, please renew your objection.
So, Mr. Bond, you said there were 3 pieces of evidence. Let's take those one at a time, starting with that financial connection you mentioned. What'd you find there?
Well, there we discovered that Drew Mars was actually the sole beneficiary of Agatha Lee's will.
Do you know whether the defendant was aware that he was going to inherit all of Agatha Lee's money?
I do, actually. I personally recovered an email from the defendant where she was discussing that inheritance.
Would you recognize that email if I showed it to you, sir?
I would, yes.
Your Honor, permission to display Exhibit 13 for foundational purposes. We'll publish it to a jury once it's been entered.
Any objection with that stipulation, Mr. Bartley?
No objection to its display, Your Honor.
Okay,
Ms.
go
Vogel,
ahead.
yes, Your Honor. Ms. Vogel, can we get Exhibit 13 on the screen? And now, sir, could you please identify Exhibit 13?
Yes, this is that email that I recovered.
Is it a fair and accurate picture of that email you recovered?
Yes, it is.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
No, sir. Looks the same.
Your Honor, at this point, we offer Exhibit 13 into evidence.
Any objection, Mr. Bartley?
Without objection, Your Honor.
Okay, it is accepted into evidence.
Permission to publish to the jury.
You may.
Now, Mr. Bond, when was this email sent?
It says in the top right there, February 1st, 2018. So just about 6 months before Miss Lee passed away.
And sir, could you please read from the 3rd sentence of this email to the end, please?
But Agatha showed me a will that's dated today saying Stevie, the no good grandkid, is out. And I get everything. The house, the money, everything. We're talking millions of dollars. This is going to totally change my life.
So now let's move on to talk about that second evidence you mentioned, the pills. Where'd you start there?
Well, there we started by looking at Miss Lee's autopsy.
Would you recognize that autopsy if I showed it to you?
Yes, I would.
Ms. Goldberg, please pull up Exhibit 2. Your Honor, it's already in evidence.
Go ahead.
Now, Mr. Bond, what is this we've just displayed?
This is Miss Lee's autopsy.
And what does this autopsy say about how Ms. Lee died?
Well, in the conclusion section, it says that the cause of death was a fatal allergic reaction to 2 pills of a drug called chloroandramine.
Sir, do you know if chloroandramine is deadly?
Not typically, sir. It's a pretty common over-the-counter drug. But I did find in the medical history of this autopsy that Miss Lee actually had a rare allergy to that drug, which meant that any quantity of it could be fatal for her.
Okay, so let's talk about how those pills of chloroandramine might have ended up in Ms. Lee's system.
Sure.
Are you familiar with Exhibit 17?
Yes, I was.
Your Honor, permission to display Exhibit 17, once again for foundational purposes.
Go ahead.
Now, sir, could you please identify this exhibit?
This is a bottle of pills that the police recovered from Drew Mars's bedroom.
Is it a fair and accurate photo of that bottle of pills?
Yes, it is.
At this time, Your Honor, we offer Exhibit 17.
Any objection?
Without objection, Your Honor.
All right, it's accepted as 17.
Permission to publish to the jury?
You may.
Sir, was it ever determined what kind of pills were inside of this bottle?
Yes, sir. The police tested the pills in this bottle and determined that they were chloroandramine, the same drug that Miss Lee had died from.
Now, I know it's a little hard to see through the orange bottle, so could you please describe the physical characteristics of these pills?
Sure. So these pills are small, they're purple, and they're shaped like little capsules.
Were there any other small purple pills shaped like capsules in Ms. Lee's house?
Yes, sir. The police found a pill sorter in Miss Lee's bedroom that had small purple pills in it.
Thank you, Ms. Goldberg. You could take the exhibit down. Now, sir, was it ever determined what the pills inside of that pill sorter were?
It was. The police tested those pills and determined that they were Miss Lee's arthritis medication. But when we looked at those two side by side, the arthritis medication and the chloroandramine, we actually saw that they were visually identical.
So now let's talk about that third piece of evidence you mentioned, the fingerprints. How'd you begin that part of your investigation?
Well, at this point, the police were considering the possibility that someone had switched some of Miss Lee's arthritis medication with the visually identical chloroandramine. So the next step was to look for any evidence about who might have done that.
Well, you said
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. May I be heard?
Please.
While this witness can testify to the police's report and what's documented within that report, this witness cannot testify to what the police were in fact considering. He's entering the state of mind of another.
May I respond? Your
Yes.
These statements are coming directly from the police report themselves. He's read it, he can testify to the contents, and it walks through the police investigation step by step, including what they considered as potential suspects, as potential methods of the way Ms. Lee died, and he's testifying to that.
I'm going to sustain the objection in part. The way that the answer was formulated did appear to be speculative. If you want to rephrase your question and try again, though, that's all right.
Certainly.
Motion to strike the answer.
It is.
Mr. Bond, you were telling us what the next part of your investigation was with regards to the fingerprints.
That's right. At that point, I personally was considering the possibility that someone had swapped the arthritis medication with the chloroandramine. So the next step was to look for evidence about who might have done it.
Well, you said that the chloroandramine pills earlier were found in Drew Mars's bedroom. Sir, do you know where exactly they were recovered from?
Yes, sir. They were recovered from a bag in Miss Mars's closet.
Would you recognize Exhibit 15, sir?
I would.
Your Honor, again, we're putting up Exhibit 15 for foundational purposes.
Go ahead.
Now, sir, could you please identify this photo?
This is the bag that was recovered from Miss Mars's closet.
Is it a fair and accurate photo of that bag?
Yes, sir. Looks like it.
At this time, Your Honor, we offer Exhibit 15 into evidence.
Any objection?
Without objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 15 is accepted into evidence.
Permission to publish to the jury?
You may.
Now, sir, what did you do after you found this bag with the chloroandramine pills inside of it in the defendant's closet?
Well, the police ran fingerprint tests on all of the evidence that was found. That included the bottle of arthritis medication, the bottle of chloroandramine, the pills in both of those bottles, as well as this bag where they had found the chloroandramine.
Okay, so let's take those one at a time, starting with the bottles. Were there any fingerprints on either of the two bottles themselves?
On the arthritis medication, there were some of Drew Mars's fingerprints on the outside. And then with the chloroandramine bottle, no usable prints, but there were smudges consistent with recent handling.
Or what about the pills inside of those bottles?
There were some prints there. Most of the pills didn't appear to have usable prints on them, but two of the arthritis medication pills did have some prints we were able to pull.
Sir, exactly how many chloroandramine pills had been found in Ms. Lee's system?
2.
And exactly how many of those arthritis medication pills had fingerprints on them?
2, sir.
Sir, were the police able to determine a match for those fingerprints?
Yes, sir. The police tested them and determined they were a match for Drew Mars.
What about that bag with the chloroandramine inside of it? Any fingerprints there?
We actually found one fingerprint on the outside of this bag.
Could you please demonstrate on this photo where that fingerprint was found?
Sure. So if you look in the bottom left there, you see the metallic zipper. That's where the police found a fingerprint.
And whose fingerprint was that?
Drew Mars.
Thank you, Mr. Bond. Nothing further at this point, Your Honor.
Okay, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May I begin?
You may.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bond.
Afternoon, sir.
I'm going to start by asking you a couple questions, but first, my name's Brennan Bartley. I'm here on behalf of the defense, all right?
All right, sounds good.
I want to start off by giving the members of the jury some context for your testimony today, okay?
Okay,
You were hired by the plaintiff in this case, right?
that's correct, sir. Mr. Stephen Rogers.
This isn't the first time you've been hired by the plaintiff.
That's right. I worked on a case for him in June of 2018 as well.
And for that case in June 2018, he paid you a total of $10,000, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, for your involvement in investigating his grandmother's death, he's offering you a paycheck totaling $25,000. Do I have that right?
Yes, sir. That was my fee for getting involved in this case.
So, sir, in total, that sums up to $35,000, all from the plaintiff.
Yes, sir.
So then with that in mind, Mr. Bond, I want to talk about what you can and can't tell us about how Agatha Lee died, all right?
All right.
Now, like you said a minute ago, there weren't any identifiable fingerprints found on the bottle of chloroandramine in Miss Mars's room, right?
That's right. No prints the police were able to identify.
Now, you, of course, didn't see who actually purchased this bottle of pills, right?
That's right.
You didn't see where it was purchased.
That's right, sir.
You didn't see when it was purchased.
That's correct, sir. The only detail of location I know about that bottle was that it was in the house.
So, sir, it's fair to say that you'd agree it's possible that that bottle was purchased by someone other than Drew Mars.
That's right, sir. I can't say who purchased that bottle.
Now, you also mentioned on direct examination about where that bottle was found. You'd agree with me, you didn't actually see when that bottle was placed in Miss Mars's bedroom.
That's right, sir. All I can tell you is that it was found in a bag in Miss Mars's closet.
So you'd agree it's possible it was placed in Miss Mars's bedroom after Agatha Lee had already died.
Yes, that's possible.
Because you didn't see who placed that bottle of pills in Miss Mars's bedroom, you'd agree it was possible that it was planted there by someone else, right?
That's right. Again, sir, I can't tell you how it got there, just that it was there.
All right, sir. So then, with that in mind, that you can't tell us how it got there, I want to move on and talk about the motive in this case.
All right.
It's fair to say that was one of the things you tried to investigate, right?
That's correct, sir.
And as part of that, you tried to determine if Miss Mars believed she was about to be written out of the will, right?
Yes, I did.
Now, as part of that, you didn't find any documents saying that the plaintiff was about to be made the beneficiary of the will, right?
No documents, sir. The only report of that was Mr. Rogers saying that conversation had happened.
So, sir, you didn't find any documentation at all saying that Miss Lee intended to make the plaintiff her heir.
That's right. No documentation.
No one other than the plaintiff said that they had heard Miss Lee say they were going to make Agatha Lee, or they were going to make the plaintiff her heir, right?
That's right, sir. Mr. Rogers did say that it was just him and Miss Lee in the room, but you're right that there aren't any other eyewitnesses.
So, Mr. Rogers is the only one who told you that that's what Agatha Lee said in that conversation. That's what you're telling us, right?
Yes, that's correct.
He's also the only person who told you that Miss Mars had overheard that conversation, right?
That's right, sir. Mr. Rogers said he was the only person in the room with Miss Lee when that conversation happened.
Sir, you'd agree with me that the first rule of detection that you have is to trust no one, right?
Yes, sir. That's a personal rule that I have at my firm.
Thank you, Mr. Bond. Your Honor, nothing further.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly.
Go ahead.
Now, sir, how many times did you ask Stevie Rogers to give you an account of what he told you from that room?
Well, when I got to the house on August 15th, that was when I asked Mr. Rogers to give me that account.
And was Mr. Rogers consistent when he gave that account to you?
Yes, sir. He told me his story. I even tried to push on it a bit. I questioned some of the details, but Mr. Rogers stayed consistent even after I did that.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation speculation as to stayed consistent.
Can you elaborate?
Yes, Your Honor. For this witness to say that Mr. Rogers maintains the same story, well, that requires him to enter the mind of the plaintiff. That's not something it's possible for him to say. He can say whether the statements that were made to him were similar, but to say that it stayed consistent, ultimately that's a conclusion for the jury to make.
May I respond?
You may.
I asked Mr. Bond about his conversations, his personal conversations with Stevie Rogers that he had over the course of that weekend. And he can tell us that he said the same thing every single time he spoke to Mr. Rogers. He can say that they were consistent. He's not entering Mr. Rogers' state of mind.
I'm going to overrule the objection. I think it's understood, but I'll caution the jury that the testimony goes only to what Mr. Bond observed in terms of consistency.
So, Mr. Bond, in your conversations, did Stevie Rogers remain consistent?
Yes, sir. Every time I spoke to him, Mr. Rogers told me the exact same story.
Thank you, Mr. Bond. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Anything further for this witness?
No recross, Your Honor.
Okay, the witness is excused.
Your Honor, and with that, the plaintiff rests, and we request a brief 5-minute recess, time allowing.
Yes, let's take a 5-minute recess. I will caution everyone that the live stream will continue, so turn off your video and your audio while you're away. Anything else I need to tell you? Okay, that's it. Let's keep it to 5 minutes, which I show 10 till, so we'll come back at 5 till.
Yes, Your Honor.
And I'll put the competitors in breakout rooms for that break. All right, folks, we're about ready to start bringing the students back in to start the next part of the trial. Could all the judges please turn on their videos just so we can confirm that you're back? All right. Melanie, are you back yet? All right, as soon as we hear from Melanie, you folks can turn your videos off. As soon as we hear from Melanie, we'll bring the students back and we'll get started. Hey, Melanie, are you back yet? All right, I just gave Melanie a call. She didn't pick up, but I left a message. I'm asking the tab room to see whether we should move on or what the next step should be. So hang tight. Okay, great. The judges are all here, so I'm going to bring the students back and we can get started.
All right, it appears we have everyone back and are ready to go. Is that correct, counsel?
Let me just look at the list, but it looks like it for my team.
Plaintiff's ready to go too, Your Honor.
All right,
we're
then
ready to-
defense counsel, you may call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Drew Mars to the stand.
All right, Ms. Mars, you are presumed sworn. Mr. Bartley, you may proceed when you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Marzayoun, but please call me Drew Mars, if that's okay.
All right, ma'am. Where are you from, Miss Mars?
I was born and raised in Beirut, in Lebanon, but I live here now for the past 15 years.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a nurse.
In your time as a nurse, did you ever meet someone by the name of Agatha Lee?
Yes, of course. I was Miss Lee's caretaker for almost 10 years.
In those 10 years you were her caretaker, can you describe your duties?
Sure. I mean, I did everything that I could to help her. You know, I cooked, I cleaned for her, I prepared her medicine, anything she asked of me, basically.
Can you describe what your relationship was like with Miss Lee?
Yes, it was amazing. She really treated me like her family. You know, we talked together, we laughed together. I would always cook, you know, would find, you know, recipes online and we'd try them together. We had a wonderful relationship.
As part of that relationship, did she ever talk to you about her will?
Yes, she did.
What exactly did she tell you?
Well, in 2018 in February, she actually showed me her old will and her new will and a letter that she sent to Stevie.
What did this new will say?
Basically, she said she was gonna leave everything to me.
Ma'am, before I go any further, I want to give you a chance to address the plaintiff's allegations directly. Did you poison Agatha Lee so you could get the money from that will?
No, of course not. Absolutely not. She was like my mother. I would never do anything to hurt her.
Then let's talk about what really happened. Have you ever met the plaintiff in this case, Stephen Rogers?
Yes, I know Stevie.
About how often would you see the plaintiff at your grandmother's house? I'm sorry, not at your grandmother's house, but at Miss Lee's house.
Well, before 2011, you know, I saw him maybe 2-3 times, but after that, I didn't see him until he came in 2018. So I didn't see him for like 7 years.
Well, for that 7-year gap, were you able to tell if the plaintiff was still in contact with Miss Lee?
Well, I never heard them talking on the phone together, or you know, I didn't see any letters from Stevie, so I don't think they talked much.
You said that you saw the plaintiff again in 2018. Can you describe the circumstances of that?
Sure. You know, he showed up out of the blue, and at first Miss Lee was, you know, maybe like nervous, but
Objection to speculation for Miss Lee's mental state.
Mr. Bartley?
Yes, Your Honor. The witness is testifying to her rationally based perceptions of Miss Lee's emotional condition. We're not actually offering this to say she was in fact nervous, but rather showing how she appeared.
May I be-
Stolberg?
Yes, Your Honor. The witness's words were Miss Lee was nervous, not Miss Lee was any descriptor that might indicate nervousness. We don't believe this is rationally based on her perception, and it would be speculative.
Mr. Bartley, we haven't heard any foundation as to what caused her to believe that, any observation. So I'm going to sustain the objection for now. You're welcome to try to get the information you're looking for some other way.
Yes, Your Honor. Miss Mars, what exactly happened when the plaintiff arrived back at the Lee Manor?
At first, it looked like Miss Lee, she was hesitant and didn't seem like she believed what he said. But after that,
Objection.
they said so much.
Speculation. She's just stating a different mental state, not any different descriptors of the same one.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Oh, yes, you may be heard.
I was just going to say we can lay that foundation right now.
Please do.
Motion to strike until that foundation is laid.
Certainly.
So, Miss Mars, can you tell us, how did Miss Lee appear when the plaintiff arrived at the house in 2018?
At first, she wasn't, her face, she didn't look like she was very excited for him to be there, but sorry, did I cut off?
Yes, you cut off.
Okay, sorry. I was just saying that at first, when he first came, her face, she wasn't very happy. She didn't look like she was very happy. She wasn't smiling or anything. But after a few days, it seemed like the relationship was great. They were spending so much time together. They were eating together, watching movies together. So it looked like the relationship was very good after a while.
Miss Mars, did your relationship with Lee change after the plaintiff arrived?
Not really. I mean, she still treated me very nicely, like I was her family, but we spent a little less time together. That's all.
I want to talk about the plaintiff's actions specifically. Did you ever hear the plaintiff asking Miss Lee about money?
Yes.
When was that?
That was the day she died, August 14th.
Can you tell us where exactly you were when you heard this conversation?
Sure. Miss Lee asked me to go get tea for her, so I bring the tea up to her office, and before I walked in, I heard an argument happening.
Objection, Your Honor, to characterizing what she heard as an argument. This is speculative, as she wasn't part of it. She does not know if the two people were arguing. She can say what she overheard. Granted, it isn't hearsay, but to say that it's an argument is speculative.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Yes.
Yes, Your Honor. This falls within her rationally based perceptions. She was able to overhear it. She was able to overhear the words. If I may make an offer of proof.
Go ahead.
The witness is going to go on to testify that the plaintiff asked Miss Lee for money, that Miss Lee told the plaintiff, no, you're not getting any money from me after I'm gone or while I'm still alive. That's sufficient for her to characterize it as an argument, but she would also have heard tones of voice.
Ms. Goldberg, I will allow you to delve into that on cross-examination. I'm going to overrule your objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, Ms. Mars, you mentioned an argument that you overheard between the plaintiff and Agatha Lee. What exactly did you hear?
I heard Stevie saying, please put me back in your will, reconsider. He was begging her to reconsider.
What did Agatha Lee say when the plaintiff begged her to reconsider?
She said, Stevie, I love you. I want to help you, but that's exactly why I will not give you a single penny more. Not now while I'm alive or after I'm gone.
What happened after this conversation, Ms. Mars?
They came out of the room and I was still holding the tea. I was shocked. And then Miss Lee, she went to the car because I was taking her to lunch. And then Stevie said something weird to me.
What exactly did the plaintiff say to you after Miss Lee told him he wasn't getting any money from her?
He looked straight at me and he said, "Don't count your millions just yet."
How did you respond?
I didn't. What do you even say to that?
You mentioned a moment ago that you were going to take Agatha Lee to lunch. Did you?
Yes, I did.
And about what time did the two of you return from that lunch?
Around 2 o'clock. We left at noon, and yeah, we came around 2 o'clock.
So on that 2-hour trip, did the plaintiff come with either of you?
No.
Was the plaintiff still at Lee Manor when you returned?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, specifically to the word still under 403 misleading. The witness can testify that Mr. Rogers was at Lee Manor, but to imply still as though he'd never left, that's something she doesn't know.
I understand your point, but I'll ask you to explore that on cross-examination. Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, Ms. Mars, in that time, do you know what the plaintiff was doing?
No, I wasn't home. I don't know.
Well, Ms. Mars, your bedroom, is there anything that would prevent the plaintiff from accessing it?
I don't think so. There's no lock or anything.
What about Ms. Lee's room? Was there anything that would have prevented the plaintiff from accessing that room?
Well, Miss Lee, she did have a lock on her door, but she rarely ever locked it, and I don't think I saw her locking it that day.
Ms. Mars, I want to then move on to what the police found in their investigation. Did you have a chance to hear the testimony of Mr. Bond?
Yes, I did.
Did you hear him say that they found a bottle of chloroandramine inside a black bag inside your bedroom?
Yes, that's what he said.
Have you seen that black bag that he was talking about?
They showed it to me at my deposition.
Do you remember if that black bag belongs to you?
No, I really don't remember seeing that bag. There's a bunch of things in that closet. It's very cluttered, and I would have to move Miss Lee's things out of the way to get my shoes or get my purse. So it may have been Miss Lee's, but I don't know. I don't remember ever seeing it.
That bottle of chloroandramine inside it, do you know what chloroandramine is?
Yes, I do. It's a medicine that they use to treat heartburn.
We've heard a lot about Miss Lee's medical conditions. Did you know the effect chloroandramine might have on her?
Yes, it has caused her a heart attack in the past. She had a very bad allergy to it.
So that bottle of chloroandramine that was found in your room, did you buy that bottle?
No, absolutely not. I would never even bring it into the house. It's deadly to Miss Lee. I would never do that.
Ms. Mars, on August 14th, did you believe that you were about to be written out of the will in favor of the plaintiff?
No, I had no reason to.
Even if you had believed that, would you have then tried to kill Agatha Lee?
No, of course not. I loved her. She was like my mother. She never treated me with anything but kindness. Never.
Thank you, Ms. Mars. Your Honor, nothing further at this time.
Cross-examination, Ms. Goldberg?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Mondani, can we get, thank you, Exhibit 17, which is already in evidence. May I proceed?
Yes.
Ms. Mars, I want to start by talking about some pills. What you see in front of you, that's a bottle of chloroandramine, right?
That's what they told me, yes.
And you're aware that Agatha Lee was allergic to chloroandramine, aren't you?
Sorry, yes, I know that.
You said on direct examination that you actually knew just one pill of chloroandramine could give Miss Lee a heart attack, didn't you?
Yes.
Now, you were Miss Lee's nurse, so you know that she took an arthritis medication, right?
She did. It's called Winterin.
I want to talk about how that Winterin and chloroandramine compare. Miss Mars, those pills are both purple, right?
Yes, they're purple, they're same size, they're identical basically, which is why I never brought them into the house. I was scared she'd mix them up or something, you know?
You say that they're identical. Also, neither of them has a smell, right?
Yes, that's true. They don't
Objection,
have a
Your Honor.
smell.
Compound.
Your Honor, I only asked one question. You know that those pills don't have a smell.
I think Mr. Bartley is probably referring to the prefatory clause, but I think it was clear to the jury and to the witness what the question was. So I'll overrule.
So neither of them, Miss Mars, has a smell?
No, they're both odorless and tasteless.
And you also know that Miss Lee actually took 2 of those Winterin pills every night, right?
Yes.
Now, you said on direct examination that you can buy chloroandramine at a pharmacy, right?
I didn't say that, but you are correct. It's a over-the-counter medication, so most pharmacies would have it.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't say that on direct examination, but you do know you can find it at a pharmacy, right?
Yes, exactly.
And Miss Mars, on the day before Miss Lee died, you went to the pharmacy, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Sorry, this is kind of embarrassing. Do you want to know what I was there for?
Well, Miss Mars, what we're interested in today is the fact that you don't have a receipt for what you bought, do you?
No, but it was my time of the month. You understand what I'm saying?
I
right?
understand what you're saying, Miss Mars, but I just want to be clear. You don't have a receipt. You also don't have a credit card statement showing what you bought?
Objection, Your Honor. Compound.
It is, I don't believe the previous question had been answered yet, Ms. Goldberg.
All right.
So I'll sustain that.
So, Miss Mars, you have nothing that shows what you bought that day.
I don't have a receipt or a credit card statement. You're right.
All right, Miss Mars, I want to talk about the payoff you received from Miss Lee's death. Before Miss Lee died, you had about $20,000 in savings, right?
Yes.
And you know now that Miss Lee was worth about $20 million, right?
Yes.
And before February of 2018, you believed that when she died, that money would go to her grandson, right?
Yes, that's what she told me.
But then in February of 2018, she told you that money would go to you, right?
Yes, I felt guilty, like I didn't deserve it, but I was so honored, you know?
I want to talk about how you responded to learning that. Mr. Mondani, can we get Exhibit 13 up, please? It's also already in evidence. This is an email that you wrote, right?
Yes.
And in this email, you say, I get everything, don't you?
Yes.
You say we're talking millions of dollars, right?
Yes.
And you also say, this is going to totally change my life.
Of course, it's a lot of money for anyone, really.
All right, Mr. Mondani, that's all we need from Exhibit 13. But then a few months after you wrote this email, well, Miss Lee's grandson showed up at her house, right?
Yes, he did.
And you said on direct examination, you noticed they were doing a lot of things together?
Yes, they were.
Miss Lee wasn't spending as much time with you.
No, but she was happier than I'd seen her in years, so I was so happy for her.
You say she seemed happy, right?
Yes.
You actually overheard a conversation, like you mentioned on direct, between Miss Lee and her grandson about that will, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
But I want to be clear, Miss Mars, when you overheard that conversation, you were standing outside of the room where it was happening, right?
Yes, I was.
And Miss Mars, you didn't take any notes about what you heard in that conversation?
No, I mean, my hands were full of, I didn't even know how to respond. I was holding the tea. I didn't know if I should go in or stay out. I didn't know what to do.
So that's a no? You didn't take any notes?
Oh, no notes.
You also didn't record that conversation, did you?
No.
And I want to be clear that after that conversation, when you took Miss Lee to lunch, like you said, you actually heard her make a phone call, didn't you?
Yes.
You believe that she was calling her attorney.
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for the witness to speculate.
Ms. Goldberg?
Your Honor, I asked the witness what she believes. She is allowed to tell me what she believes.
Mr. Bartley, you have anything further?
Your Honor, as to the witness's belief, that is calling for the witness to speculate. If she doesn't actually know who's being called, she can't testify, whether it's framed as her belief or otherwise, as to who was called.
I'm going to give Ms. Goldberg some wide latitude on cross-examination, but you're certainly welcome to revisit it if you need to.
Miss Mars, you believe she was calling her lawyer because the person she was calling had the same name as her lawyer, right?
Yes.
And that lawyer you believe she was calling, that's the same lawyer that read Miss Lee's will after she died, right?
Yes.
I want to talk about what happened at that will reading. That will reading was about a week after Miss Lee passed away, right?
That's right.
And at that point, the lawyer who read that will announced that you would be receiving all of Miss Lee's estate, right?
Yes.
Miss Mars, when you heard that, you said, I had no idea, didn't you?
That's what I said, yes.
You said that you didn't know you'd be receiving all of Miss Lee's money.
That's right.
Miss Mars, that wasn't true, was it?
No, it was a lie. I lied. I'm very sorry. It was wrong of me to do that, but you have to understand, just a few days ago, Stevie called me a murderer. I didn't want the police to think that I had done anything wrong. You know, like I didn't want them to think that I had even hurt Miss Lee.
Miss Mars, I understand that you're saying you're sorry, but I want to break down a little bit of what you just said. You lied in front of the police because you didn't want them to think you had motive, right?
Yes, I didn't want them to think that I had hurt Miss Lee.
To be specific, Miss Mars, you didn't want them to think you had killed Miss Lee, right?
Yes.
Nothing further at this time.
Mr. Bartley?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Mars, opposing counsel was asking you about an attorney that Agatha Lee had. Had you ever met this attorney before?
Yes, Miss Lee, she met with him often. They would have meetings all the time, yes.
Were all of these meetings about Agatha Lee's will?
No.
Ms. Mars, is there any amount of
Your
money?
Honor, to lack of foundation as to how this witness would know what those meetings were about.
Mr. Bartley, can you lay that foundation?
Sure, Your Honor. Ms. Mars, were you present for any of these meetings with Miss Lee and her attorney?
Many of them, not all, but they usually would talk about royalties or, copyright, things like that. That's what I would hear.
So, Ms. Mars, is there any amount of money that would cause you to murder Agatha Lee?
No, absolutely not.
Thank you. Your Honor, nothing further.
No recross, Your Honor.
The witness is excused. Thank you, Ms. Mars. Mr. Benjamin, do you have a witness to call?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Ryan Cabrera.
Ms. Cabrera, you are presumed sworn. Mr. Benjamin, you may go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Is this thing on?
It is, ma'am. We can
Oh,
see.
okay.
Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Hello there. My name's Ryan Cabrera. It's so nice to meet you all.
What do you do for a living, Miss Cabrera?
Miss Cabrera. Oh, you flatter me, dear. No one's called me that in decades. Oh, what do I do for a living? I'm a writer.
Well, how'd you become a writer?
because of my mother, Nicole. You see, she was a very frugal woman. No matter how hot it got, she refused to turn on the air conditioning. And keep in mind, we lived in Phoenix, Arizona. So I spent all my time at the library to use their air conditioning, and I just fell in love with all the books and decided I should become a writer.
Well, then, Ms. Cabrera, I want to move on and talk about how you're involved in today's case. Do you know why you're here today?
Yes, I do. I was asked by Drew to come testify about my friend Aggie.
By Aggie, are you referring to Agatha Lee?
Oh, yes, that's just my little nickname for her.
Well, I want to be upfront with the members of the jury. After you agreed to testify, did you and Miss Mars ever speak again?
Yes, I remember we spoke over the telephone for a little bit.
What about?
She asked me to come testify, and that's when I asked her if I could have Aggie's book collection, because she asked me if I wanted anything of Aggie since, we were so close and all.
Why did you ask for Agatha Lee's book collection?
Oh, I learned that some of them were actually Aggie's unpublished works, and things like short stories, plays, even a couple of haikus. She had an experimental phase way back when. And I thought they'd make an excellent addition to the Midlands Public Library. They have a silent auction every year.
Well, with that in mind, then I'd like to move on and talk about your relationship with Agatha Lee. When did you two first meet?
We first met in, it was the day before my birthday, February 8th in 2018.
What did you two talk about?
I was writing her biography, so we mainly talked about that amongst other things.
When you two would meet while you were writing her biography, where'd that usually happen?
Normally, I would show up to her house, the Lee Manor, fancy, I know, right? And that's where we talk. And occasionally, we'd head out to Calkins Campground to do our, prancercise. Have you heard of it? It's quite strenuous. I always had to remind Aggie I'm not a young and spry 60-year-old anymore.
Well, ma'am, you just mentioned that you would meet up with Miss Lee at her house, Lee Manor. While you two had your sessions, was there ever anybody else there?
Yes, sometimes I'd see Drew there.
Ma'am, did you ever hear Agatha Lee talking about Drew Mars?
Oh, yes, they talked. Oh, she talked about her all day long. I swear, if I didn't know that Drew was her caretaker, I would have thought they were granddaughter and grandma.
What makes you say that?
Oh, well, she just kept going on about how much she loved Drew, how she was even planning on leaving Drew everything in her will, just wouldn't nonstop, I'll tell you.
When Agatha Lee said she was planning on leaving everything in her will to Drew, when was that?
I believe she told me this in April. Yes, it was before Easter, so April.
Now, apart from Drew Mars, did you and Agatha ever discuss anyone else?
We mainly talked about her, but occasionally she'd bring up her grandson, Stevie.
I want to talk a little bit more about Stephen Rogers. When was the last time you remember you and Miss Lee discussing Stephen Rogers?
The last time she brought up Stevie was the day before she passed.
What did she say?
I don't know what she was talking about, but I remember she kept saying things like, I hope Stevie will find it in his heart to forgive me. I love Stevie. I hope he can forgive me one day. Things like that. I don't know what she was talking about.
Ma'am, in that conversation after Miss Lee said, I hope Stevie will forgive me, did she ever say she was going to put Stevie Rogers back into her will?
No, she never mentioned that.
Did she ever tell you she was going to take Drew Mars out of her will completely?
No, she never mentioned that either.
In that conversation where she said, I hope Stevie will forgive me, well, after that, did you ever talk to Miss Lee again?
No, that was the last day I saw her.
Thank you, Ms. Cabrera. Your Honor, we've got nothing further.
Cross?
Cross-examination, Mr. Mondani.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Cabrera.
Oh, well, good afternoon, dear.
I want to start by talking about an instance where you saw the defendant giving Ms. Lee some pills.
All right.
You know that Drew Mars is a caretaker of Ms. Lee?
Yes, I believe she's a registered nurse, and I think that's a very noble profession. I wish my granddaughter did that too.
And she's the only person you had ever seen giving Ms. Lee any pills, correct?
Yes, you're right.
And one time she began explaining what the pill was, correct?
I think so, yes. I don't know whether she said the name of it or not, but she started talking a little bit about it, yes.
She was talking about it, but Ms. Lee stopped her, correct?
Yes, she did.
Ms. Lee didn't ask what the medication was called.
No, she didn't.
She didn't ask what the medication was for.
She didn't ask that either.
And she didn't even ask what the side effects would be, did she?
Nope, she didn't ask that either.
All she said was, I will take whatever you hand me. True?
I think she might have also said something along the lines of, oh, I've already heard this a million times, dear, but she also said that too. You're right.
I will take whatever you hand me, ma'am.
Yes, she said that after. She said, oh, well, stop with the spiel about Drew. Like, she did say that. You're right, though.
So now let's talk about that lunch conversation you were just telling us about. Now, as her biographer, you asked her questions during this lunch, correct?
Yes, ping pong back and forth.
But you wanted to meet with her again, isn't that right?
Oh, yes, later that week I asked her if she wanted to get matching perms with me, but she said no. I don't know why. Who wouldn't want to look like this?
Well, we'll get to why she said no in a bit, but you suggested Friday as a date for your meeting, correct?
Yes, that's a 2-for-1 deal at my salon. You should go too. Everyone should go. Once, we can go back, of course.
I'll check it out, Ms. Cabrera. But for now, I just need a yes or no to my questions. You suggested Friday?
Yes, that's the day.
But she said she can't do Friday because she's planning on meeting with someone else, right?
Yes, I think she mentioned someone named Kirby.
She specifically told you that she was planning on meeting with her attorney. Isn't that right?
Yes, I think her name was Kirby.
So just to be clear, the day before Ms. Lee died, she told you she was planning on meeting her attorney.
Yes, I don't know what about, but yeah, you're right.
Well, now I want to talk about why you're testifying in court today. In June of 2020, the defendant called you on your phone, right?
Yes.
And at this point, you already knew that the defendant was being sued.
Yes, I was aware.
The defendant asked you to come testify?
Yes, Drew did ask me to come talk about Aggie, you're right.
And ma'am, we can agree that at the end of today's trial, there's potentially a big payoff for you, isn't there?
No, there isn't.
Well, ma'am, during that conversation, the defendant asked you what you would like to have from Ms. Lee's estate. Isn't that right?
Yes, Drew, after I agreed to testify, asked me if there was anything I wanted of Aggie since we were close. You're right.
And you know that Agatha Lee has a dozen of unpublished works in her study.
Yes, those short stories and haikus. I'm not going to lie, I don't really want to read her haikus, but I'm going to be a supportive friend, don't worry.
And you know that Agatha Lee has only ever published one book, isn't that right?
Yes, Death in a Bottle.
Ma'am, she made a fortune off of this book, isn't that right?
I don't know exactly how much she made, but I knew it was very popular.
Well, so when the defendant asked you what you would like to have from Ms. Lee's estate, you said you want all of those unpublished books.
I asked for the book collection.
And the defendant said, yes, you can have that book collection. True?
Yeah, she agreed to let me have them, which is so great. I think the library will really appreciate it.
But ma'am, you know that you won't get a single one of those books if Drew Mars loses today's trial.
I wouldn't say that. I honestly don't really know. I don't really understand all the legal proceedings and jargon like you do, dear.
Well, that's what the defendant told you, correct?
Oh, yeah, she did tell me something along those lines. You're right. I don't think she's a lawyer, though, so I'll trust your word.
And now you're testifying on behalf of the defendant.
Yes, she did ask me to come here. You're right.
Thank you, Ms. Cabrera, for your time. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Any redirect, Mr. Benjamin?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Ms. Cabrera, when you heard Ms. Lee say that she was planning on meeting her lawyer on Friday, did you ever hear her say that she was planning on meeting to change her will?
No, she didn't mention anything like that.
And Mr. Madani just asked you a couple of questions about those books from Agatha's study. Do you plan on earning any money from those books if you get them?
No, I honestly don't need it. The library needs it way more than I do with all the funding cuts they have to deal with.
Thank you, Mr. Cabrera. Nothing further, Your Honor.
No recross, Your Honor.
All right. The witness is excused.
With that, Your Honor, the defense rests its case in chief, and we're ready to proceed right into closings.
So are we,
Right.
Your Honor.
Okay. I'm going to ask the scoring judges to please switch back to speaker view, since you'll only need to see one person speaking at a time. And then we will be ready with that for the plaintiff's closing argument, Mr. Mandani.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, Mr. Benjamin, and may it please the court. The pills, the prints, and the payoff. I had no idea. I had no idea. That's what the defendant said on August 20th of 2018 when she was told that she would be inheriting all of Agatha Lee's estate. Members of the jury, we know that that's not true. And that will be the first lie that Drew Mars tells in today's case. Because you saw this email sent on February 1st of 2018. I get everything. The house, the money, everything. We're talking millions of dollars. It's totally going to change my life. And today you heard why she lied. Because just a few months ago, my co-counsel, Ms. Goldberg, asked the defendant on the stand why she had done that. And she volunteered. She said, I lied to the police because I didn't want them to think that I was the one who killed Agatha Lee. But members of the jury, today that lie wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to hide what she had done. Because we showed you the pills, the prints, and the payoff. That's why we're in court today. Because in Midlands, if you kill someone, you can't inherit any of their money. And that's why Mr. Rogers is suing the defendant, so that Drew Mars does not get to profit from her crime. And as Ms. Goldberg explained to you at the beginning of today's trial, we have to prove this to you by a preponderance of the evidence, simply meaning it's more likely than not. So I'm going to walk through the evidence, starting with those pills, because those pills are the murder weapon in today's trial. You heard today that this bottle contains a drug called chloroandramine. And the defendant knew that just 2 pills of chloroandramine could kill Ms. Lee. Now, chloroandramine pills are nearly identical to another drug, same color, same shape, same size, not gonna have odor, and that drug was Ms. Lee's arthritis medication. And the defendant knew that too. She knew that if she switched those pills, Ms. Lee would have no way of knowing. And you heard from Ms. Cabrera, the biographer, that when Drew Mars administered medication to Ms. Lee said, I will take whatever you hand me. She doesn't ask what the medication is called, what it's for, what the side effects would be. She completely trusted the defendant. The defendant knew that, and she took advantage of it. She switched those pills. But how do we know it was the defendant who switched those pills? Well, that brings us to those prints. Because you heard that there were 2 key locations where those prints were found. The first place where the defendant's prints were found were on a bottle of pills of Ms. Lee's arthritis medication. Now, the defense claimed that today, she's a caretaker. Of course, her fingerprints are there, but members of the jury, if that were the case, there would be multiple pills with the defendant's fingerprints on there, but that was not the case. There were exactly 2 pills with the defendant's fingerprints on them. The exact 2 she would have to take out of the pill sorter where Ms. Lee's arthritis medications were kept. Now, the second place where the defendant's fingerprints were found was on a bag inside of the defendant's closet. The same bag that contained the bottle of chloroangerine inside of it. The defendant told you on the stand, well, I don't know how that bag got there. It's not mine. That I moved it, maybe I touched it. But members of the jury, again, her fingerprints weren't found on random places on the bag. They were found on a small zipper in the corner. Meaning that you have to open that bag for her fingerprints to be left on that zipper. And what those two sets of fingerprints tell you is very simple. The defendant opened that bag, took out those deadly drugs of chloroangerine, placed 2 in Ms. Lee's pill sorter, took out the 2 arthritis medications that were supposed to be there, and put them back in their original bottle. You heard that on the night she died. Ms. Lee never took those arthritis medications like she was supposed to. Instead, she took those 2 chloroangerine pills. But why? Why would the defendant do that? And that's the payoff. Because the defendant admitted on the stand that she was to gain $20 million if Ms. Lee died. In February of 2018, Agatha Lee changed her will to make Drew Mars the sole beneficiary of her will. But not for long. Because in August 14th of 2018, Ms. Lee has a conversation with her grandson, Stevie Rogers, and tells him, I will leave everything to you. Now, the defense wants to contest that. And we have a different account of that conversation, so it comes down to who you believe. And members of the jury, we brought you corroborative evidence. Both defense witnesses agreed on the stand that Ms. Lee had an appointment with her lawyer for 4 days later. And she made that appointment right after she had this conversation. I mean, the only reason she would make an appointment with her attorney just minutes after she has this conversation is if she were going to change her will. And the defendant knew that. She was standing outside that door listening. She knew she just had 4 days to do something. Make sure Ms. Lee never went through with that plan. Make sure she never changed that will. So she goes to a pharmacy, comes back at night, and someone sees her sneaking into that room. And that's when she switches those pills. So now I want to take a second to talk about what the defense has claimed throughout today's case. And what they're asking you to believe. They're asking you to believe that Stevie Rogers killed his own grandmother for money? I mean, sure, we could argue all day about who would have gotten that inheritance had Agatha Lee been allowed to live a little longer. But both parties can agree on a couple of things. You see, both parties agree that Agatha Lee's latest will left everything to Drew Mars and nothing to Stevie Rogers. Both parties agree that Stevie Rogers knew that. So what the defense is asking you to believe is that instead of spending some more time with his grandmother, or trying to get into her good graces, or trying to get back into that will, he decides to kill her. The defense wants you to believe that before trying any other option that's available to him, his first plan was to murder his grandmother, hope he doesn't get caught, hope he can frame Drew Mars, and then hope that he wins today's trial. I mean, members of the jury, not only does that make no sense, it's also not supported by the evidence. Because when you look at those pills, the prints, and the payoff, one thing becomes very clear. Drew Mars killed Agatha Lee. Don't let her reap the spoils too. Find in favor of Stevie Rogers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mondani. For the defense,
Yes, Your Honor.
you may proceed.
Just a second. He was running out of money, and he was running out of time. $2,000. That's an important number, so I'll say it again. $2,000. That's how much money the plaintiff had left when he showed up on Agatha Lee's doorstep. That $2 million trust fund his parents left him, that was gone. And he had just learned that he'd been taken out of his grandmother's will, and she had no intentions of putting him back. He knew if he didn't get that money soon, he'd be out on the streets. And so a desperate man took desperate measures. Now today, the plaintiff has tried to make you think that's not true. They've tried to make you think that this case is open and shut because they know what's at stake. They know if they can't convince you by a preponderance of the evidence that it was Miss Mars who knowingly or purposely caused the death of Agatha Lee, well, the plaintiff doesn't get his payout. Because you see, in order to believe the plaintiff's story, we've really got to ask ourselves two questions. One, did Agatha Lee actually plan on putting the plaintiff back into the will? And two, what reliable forensic evidence was there that pinned Miss Mars to this crime? So first, did Agatha Lee actually plan on putting the plaintiff back into the will? And we know she didn't. Miss Mars came up here today and told you she overheard that conversation in the study. Agatha Lee said, "Until I'm dead, there's no way you're getting back in that will." Miss Cabrera told you about their conversation they had at lunch, where Miss Lee said, "I hope Stevie will forgive me," just hours after that conversation in the study. Now, the plaintiff is trying to tell you a different story. They're trying to tell you that the plaintiff showed up for the first time in 7 years, saw his grandmother for 2 months, and like that, she decided she was giving him everything back. All $20 million to the plaintiff and not a dime for her devoted caretaker for 10 years. But think about who you heard that story from today. Aside from the plaintiff, how many witnesses took the stand and confirmed that? Zero. Not a single other witness who spoke with Miss Lee the day that before she died confirmed that story. Now, Mr. Madani spent a good time talking about a lawyer too. They told you that Agatha Lee had a meeting planned with her lawyer for Friday, and obviously that's when she was going to be changing her will. Members of the jury, if that were true, where's the lawyer? I mean, don't you think if that lawyer could confirm they had an appointment to change her will, the plaintiff would have had her up here in a second to tell you all about it? Why isn't she here? Because the plaintiff knows what she would have said. Agatha Lee wasn't planning on changing a thing. And that brings us to our second point. Was there actually any reliable forensic evidence that pinned Miss Mars to this crime? And we know there wasn't. Because for the plaintiff, they tried to bring you two things. They tried to bring you Mars's fingerprints and a bottle of pills. I want to start first with those fingerprints. And they told you they found Mars's fingerprints on 2 pills of Winter. And Mr. Madani is right. It was Miss Mars's fingerprints on those pills because that was her job. Every week she filled up that weekly pill container. And so for the night before she died, Miss Mars did put 2 pills of Winterin inside, but she didn't take them out. Of course you'd find her prints on those pills. Members of the jury, I'm a lawyer. Okay, and part of my job is to wave around briefcases and legal pads like these and closings like this to wave in front of you all. And I'll bet if you looked at those legal pads, you'd find my prints all over them. In fact, I'd be surprised if you didn't. Because that's my job, members of the jury. Because the truth is, those prints, they aren't evidence. Because the real evidence is where those prints aren't. We didn't hear any testimony today about prints that were found on the actual bottle of chlorandramine pills. The one thing that could tie Miss Mars definitively to this murder, and there's no prints on those. Now, they told you they found them in a black bag that had Miss Mars's fingerprints on it, but think about that, members of the jury. Miss Mars has been living in Lee Manor for over 10 years. Is it reasonable to think that she wouldn't have touched at some point a black bag in her closet that's been there for over a decade? They tried to tell you that you wanted to keep track of 3 things today: pills, prints, and the payout. We know that Miss Mars's fingerprints weren't on the actual pills that mattered. In fact, all the prints that they found proved nothing. And a payout? Well, we heard proof today that my client's payout was never in danger. But there was someone who was running out of money. There was someone who was running out of time. There was someone who was desperate, who knew that Miss Lee was allergic to chlorandramine and who knew where to put it. That was the plaintiff. And when analyzing the plaintiff's case today, looking at their guilt, we've got to ask ourselves three things. One, did the plaintiff know how to kill his grandmother? Of course he did. He told us today that he knew Miss Lee was allergic to chlorandramine. He was alone in the house for hours while Miss Lee left. He had access to the second floor, access to her bedroom, and access to the closet inside of Miss Mars's room. He just had to wait for her to take the fall. Two, did he know that his plan would work? Of course he did, because he knew about the Slayer statute. Members of the jury, that's pretty simple. All that says is that if you kill someone, you're found liable for killing them, you can't inherit any property from them. So, if Mr. Rogers killed Agatha Lee, made it seem like it was Miss Mars who did it, Miss Mars wouldn't get a dime, and all 20 million would come rushing back over to the plaintiff. And three, why? Why would Mr. Rogers commit this crime in the first place? Because he was running out of money. He was down to just $2,000 in his bank account. He had blown through a $2 million trust fund, and he knew that his grandmother wasn't putting him back into the will. He was running out of money. He was running out of time, and he was out of options. See, members of the jury, I've played basketball my whole life. And in basketball, there's this play called the full court shot. You see, the thing is, teams only use it when they're desperate, when they're down in points, when they're running out of time. They've got nothing left to lose. So what it is they inbound the ball and they just chuck it all the way down the court, praying that it goes in. Agatha Lee's death, this lawsuit, this is the plaintiff's full court shot, and he is praying, members of the jury, that you let it go in. But the Slayer statute is simple. It's to make sure that crime doesn't pay, that murder doesn't pay. So we're asking you to stay true to that statute today, to make sure that the plaintiff's murder doesn't pay, to make sure that his plan doesn't work, to make sure that his last shot doesn't go in. That's why we're going to ask you to find Miss Mars not liable. Thank you.
A rebuttal, Your Honor?
Yes, go ahead. Time allowing.
Yes, if I may inquire how much time I have left before I start?
40 seconds.
Perfect.
Proceed when you're ready.
Mr. Benjamin just told you that the killer in today's case was out of time and out of money, and we agree. But that person isn't Stevie Rogers. He had all the time in the world. It was Drew Mars who was about to lose her inheritance. It was Drew Mars who had just 4 days to come up with a plan, and when you look at the pills, the prints, and the payoff, it becomes clear that it was Drew Mars who killed Agatha Lee. Fine in favor of Stevie Rogers. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. We need to finish ballots and get them submitted, and I'm going to turn it over to our bailiff at this point.
Hey folks, congratulations to the competitors. And to everyone watching at home, we're going to be turning off the live stream right now, but thank you so much for watching and supporting this activity and all these students. So have a